Let's take a moment to celebrate bold new beginnings. That's what the CEO of Halden Systems chirped into his headset mic in Phoenix summer of 2019, like he was announcing a county fair raffle instead of gutting careers. 80 of us crammed into the rented hotel ballroom. Buzzing lights overhead, coffee gone stale hours ago, and that plastic HR smile that only shows up when trouble's brewing. Then he dropped it. We've made the difficult decision to streamline our operations. Streamline. Corporate jargon so empty it might as well be white noise. My name was third on the list. We thank Marlene Fisher for her 20 years of service. But moving forward, we need to refresh our talent base. I didn't hear the rest. Just that dull roar in my ears, the one that comes when your body can't decide between fainting or breaking something. My hands went cold steady like they always did before I cleaned up one of their crises. No warning, no discussion. Just a public execution in front of coworkers who'd watched me hold together our most sensitive defense-linked contracts for 2 decades. I was the fixer, the midnight firewall, the one who kept auditors satisfied and regulators off our backs. But to this new CEO, some LinkedIn inflated hotshot with a blockchain obsession, I was nothing but redundant fat. Someone even clapped. A few followed. Mechanical, awkward applause. One voice even offered, "You'll bounce back." Bounce back from what a career erased in a PowerPoint slide. HR slid me a cardboard box and a stress ball like I was supposed to weep with gratitude. I didn't speak. Just nodded once like I'd been dismissed from jury duty and walked out. But the real story didn't start until the elevator ride. Phone out. Compliance portal open. 2-step authentication. Biometric scan. Passphrase. Session confirmed. I navigated to Form 1916B. Responsible officer status change, immediate effect. 1 click. Warning message. Submission will trigger a mandatory stop work order across all contracts requiring compliance oversight. I didn't hesitate. I hit confirm. By the time those elevator doors slid open into the Arizona heat, their empire was already bleeding $100,000 an hour, and they had no idea why. What none of that polished leadership team at Halden Systems ever stopped to check was that I wasn't just the woman who filed papers neatly or sent polite reminders about renewal dates. I was the responsible officer, the only legally designated signer for every single federal and defense-adjacent project they touched, on paper, in the systems, in blood. And when a responsible officer's employment ends, federal law demands one thing within 24 hours: notify the agency and issue a mandatory stop work order. Not optional, not negotiable. The kind of rule that carries fines sharp enough to gut a corporation in days. But I didn't need to spell that out during the meeting. I didn't need to cry or argue. I only needed to press one button. By the time I rolled my suitcase into the Phoenix parking garage, HR had already emailed me a separation summary and a survey link asking for feedback on my transition experience. I almost laughed. Deleted both. Let them enjoy the silence. Because while they were still patting themselves on the back, the bomb was already ticking. At 8:47 a.m., the next morning, the first whisper showed up in Slack. Anyone else locked out of Project Sentinel by 9:02, another pinged from the East Coast Fed cloud down. Compliance flag on login screen. By 10:30, every engineer tied to government-tagged projects had been yanked. Not paused, pulled. Teams shoved into internal documentation review, which was HR speak for sit tight, while legal panics. The compliance dashboard, normally glowing green, now looked like a Christmas tree of red. Non-compliant. Non-compliant. Pending RO reinstatement. It didn't even take 12 hours for the detonation to rip through their gut. At 12:12 p.m., a flat black and white email landed in the general counsel's inbox. No logo, no pleasantries, just one sentence from the oversight office. Your organization is no longer considered compliant for federal or defense-linked contracts under Titles 48 and 32. Attached was a PDF stamped official stop work order, effective 5:52 p.m. the night before. Exactly 27 minutes after I'd stepped into that elevator and submitted the form. Fines accruing at $100,000 per hour. By then, I was at home robe, on tea in hand, watching their empire unravel in real time. Notifications piled up like Jenga blocks teetering on the edge. Sorry to hear the news. Let me know how I can help. Wait, they really let you go? That's insane. Huge mistake. You always had the quiet superpower energy. Quiet, yes, but not powerless. The pings kept coming from ex-colleagues, engineers, project leads, even a couple of PMs I never liked, all fishing for answers. Hey, quick question. Did anything you worked on tie into compliance? Who's covering your part of the risk matrix? Any chance you still have access to the JCAT 17 portal? If you believe quiet strength deserves a louder voice, hit subscribe. You'll be the first to see how this story unfolds in the next chapter. I left them on read. Not out of smugness. Smug is for winning trivia night. This wasn't revenge or sabotage. This was consequence, cold, inevitable, and legal. Meanwhile, Halden Systems' Slack channels morphed into chaos gardens. Developers argued over login errors. Product managers raged about deadlines. Someone tried escalating to IT, but IT just posted a screenshot of the system error, action denied. Responsible officer inactive. No backup assigned. Of course, no backup. Why would they? I never made noise. Never demanded titles or applause. I just did my job so thoroughly they forgot how critical I was. Until I stopped. Somewhere in a glass-walled office, I imagined the CEO staring at the oversight office's email, wondering how a $1.7 billion company with next-gen resilience was paralyzed by the woman he called expendable. They hadn't fired an administrator. They'd fired the keystone. And the thing about keystones, you don't notice them until the arch collapses. By Friday morning, the panic had shoes on. At 7:31 a.m., legal blasted an internal RED urgent memo asking why the governance risk and compliance system wasn't accepting credentials. They tried the admin override. Denied. Reset the server cache. Denied. Even root users hit the same blunt rejection RRO access required for administrative override. Current responsible officer, vacant. The truth was dawning on them. Without me, there was no compliance. Without compliance, there were no contracts. And with every passing hour, another $100,000 bled from their balance sheet, while I sipped tea at home in Phoenix, watching the unraveling from a safe, deliberate distance. They chalked it up to a glitch at first. Always a glitch. As if systems just decide to mutiny on payday. I rebooted the internal GRC node cluster. Twice. Nothing. By 8:15 a.m., the CTO waddled into the war room, half a protein bar hanging out of his mouth, muttering, "We revoked her credentials during offboarding." SOP. Then he shrugged, eyes glued to his phone like it was someone else's problem. Legal didn't shrug. Legal sweated. They dug through contracts, old compliance memos, dusty PDFs nobody had read in a decade. That's when a junior associate flagged one line in the compliance charter. Only the named responsible officer may certify, modify, or deactivate federal compliance status within regulated systems. And just like that, they realized the truth. They hadn't fired a paper pusher. They had surgically removed the only person standing between them and a federal firing squad. By 9:12, my phone was stacked with 17 missed calls, 12 from HR, 3 from legal, 1 from the COO, and the last from the CEO himself. I didn't answer. No voicemail, no text. Just silence and the rising temperature of their panic. They even tried to reset my credentials manually. The system spit it back as unauthorized replacement attempt, logged and reported. Translation: somewhere in the Department of Oversight, an intern just got a red flag on their dashboard that Halden Systems was trying to backdoor compliance. By 10:47, guessing had turned into full-blown panic. The VP of Client Relations canceled a quarterly briefing with a defense subcontractor because the compliance badge on their shared portal had turned gray. Gray means uncertified, and uncertified means non-billable. Contracts stalled. Deadlines froze. Budgets bled. Meanwhile, I sat at home in my robe stirring honey into my tea while CNN hummed in the background. Every few minutes, I refreshed LinkedIn, watching coworkers update their bios with gems like open to work or exploring new opportunities. Corporate code for this ship's on fire, and I don't have a raft. They'd even purged my name from the company directory like I was radioactive. But here's the kicker: inside the system, my ID still showed active pending confirmation. And without me, it always would. Not because they hadn't removed me, but because the system wouldn't let them. That was the part no one understood. Firing me didn't erase my designation. They needed my signature, my voluntary signature, to finalize the transition. That wasn't a guideline, it was the rule. Until then, every government-tagged project they touched was toxic. I sipped my tea, muted my phone, and let them scream into the void. This wasn't my fire to put out. At 11:42 a.m., the cascade began. Not an explosion, but a slow bleed. The Defense Logistics Initiative flagged them first. Then 2 aerospace subcontractors. Then a sensitive R&D division flagged under dual-use export controls. By lunchtime, 6 entities had issued notices of non-compliance. 4 froze payments. 1 went scorched earth, invoking breach clause 445B. All project activities suspended. Liquidated damages commence under Section 9.2. Translation: you owe us money. The CFO, cardigan draped and usually unflappable, suddenly twitched his left eye. He did the math, then did it again. By 2:00 p.m., his internal memo hit inboxes: urgent fines accruing at $100,000 per hour. Immediate action required. He even embedded a ticking clock at the top. It was desperate theater and meaningless. An emergency board meeting was called. In person, not Zoom. That's when you know the house is on fire. I wasn't there, of course, but friends forwarded me whispers. The CEO opened with a sweaty PowerPoint operational disruption root cause analysis. His first words: "This is a middle management issue." Blaming the middle, always a coward's move. He jabbed at the CTO. "You should have known revoking her credentials would trigger this." Then, at legal, why wasn't there a backup RO in place? Then HR, who approved her separation without a continuity plan. Even procurement caught strays. Why was her name still on that 2015 contract? The room froze because someone had just pulled up the compliance charter. And in black and white, it said only one thing: designation of responsible officer is non-transferable without the existing officer's signed consent. Their consent. My consent. And I wasn't giving it. Someone, likely the general counsel, finally pulled up the compliance charter and read it aloud. Designation of responsible officer is non-transferable and irrevocable without written confirmation from the current designee. In absence of such, all contracts, systems, and certifications remain inactive until confirmation is received and approved. That clause carried my name, in ink. They had assumed foolishly that the role was ceremonial, a box checked like ordering office lanyards or booking conference rooms. They never grasped that I'd spent the last decade weaving myself into the DNA of every single compliance process. And now their multi-million-dollar contracts were unraveling like a sweater in a washer full of scissors. The board asked only one question: is there a way to reinstate her access? Legal hesitated, then admitted yes, but she has to do it voluntarily, in writing, and the system logs intent. If she refuses, reinstatement is blocked. The silence must have been suffocating. Dry erase markers, burnt coffee, and the raw panic of realizing the only extinguisher had walked out the day before, in heels and a calm smile. While they blamed each other, I sat at home, finally steady. I thought back on all the crises I'd cleaned up quietly: midnight audits, near miss vendor contracts, Homeland Security alerts that never saw daylight because I killed them before they grew teeth. I used to believe in the mission. I thought the work mattered. But that belief died the moment they handed me a cardboard box and called it refreshing talent. Now the mess was theirs, and I wasn't offering a single towel. At 6:17 p.m. that evening, while the board still argued over whose head should roll, someone in IT tried brute force. They cracked open the GRC management console and attempted a forced update. Remove my name. Add a new responsible officer from a short list of qualified candidates with flashy resumes, but none of the clearance history. The menus responded. Names appeared. It looked like progress, but when they hit save, the system blinked one message in uncompromising federal gray: transfer blocked. Active RO must authorize change via signed certificate form 1916C, and beneath, in smaller type, unauthorized attempts are reportable offenses. Unauthorized attempts to circumvent RO protocol will be reported per 48 CFR Section 9.406. Legal caught that line and froze. Someone half joked about photoshopping my signature. The CEO, red-faced and unraveling, actually said it out loud, then forged her signature. I'm told the room went silent. The general counsel, usually soft-spoken with orthopedic shoes and ginger tea, looked like he'd aged a decade in seconds. Hands flat on the table, voice like broken glass. That's a felony. A federal felony. Minimum 5 years. We're not discussing this again. No one moved. Not even a cough. That's when it finally sank in. There was no backdoor, no patch, no reboot that could erase me. They needed me. Meanwhile, I was at home, calm as a cat in a sunbeam. I opened my laptop, logged into LinkedIn, and hovered over my job title. Deleted Senior Compliance Officer at Halden Systems. Replaced it with Independent Compliance Consultant, Federal Risk Strategy Defense and Dual Use Systems. I added one clean line: currently exploring new opportunities. Select engagements only. No outreach. No messages. I didn't need to. Within an hour, profile views tripled. By 10:00 p.m., I had 2 cold emails from defense contractors. By morning, 3 more. All curious, all urgent. One even wrote, "Saw what happened. If you're the RO everyone's whispering about, we need to talk." The whispers had begun. Back at Halden, the delusion phase was in full swing. The CEO ordered PR to draft a statement about unexpected regulatory turbulence and active partnership with federal agencies. Empty air. No one bought it. Contractors were already pulling out, sending polite legalese that boiled down to "call us when you can legally exist again." Inside the walls, morale collapsed like a punctured lung. Teams reshuffled projects, paused budgets, frozen. Security clearance liaisons went dark. The COO tried to rally with a company-wide Slack post about resilience through adversity. Someone replied with a Titanic orchestra gif. 87 reactions later, the message was clear. The ship was sinking, and I wasn't on it anymore. Someone replied with a Titanic orchestra gif. 87 reactions followed. Perfect soundtrack for the mess they'd created. Meanwhile, legal dissected the compliance charter, my clause line by line. They even flew in 3 outside consultants overnight, bleeding money by the hour. But no matter how many experts they summoned, one line couldn't be escaped. All authority is non-transferable without direct participation and verification by the current responsible officer, whose intent must be unambiguous and willing. Unambiguous. Willing. Which meant even if they begged, even if they threw money or rehired me with fanfare, the system would block them unless I signed voluntarily. And I wasn't answering their calls. At 8:09 a.m. Monday, the empire took its first real punch. A $14 million government contract, years in the making, months from rollout, was axed with bureaucratic precision. The letter cited current non-compliance with RO designation and oversight requirements. Translation: You fired the only person who could sign off. You're radioactive. Goodbye. The cancellation hit the executive suite like a pipe bomb wrapped in subpoenas. The CFO tried spin temporary hurdles, contractual delays, but no one bought it. Not the board. Not the clients. Certainly not the investors already circling like vultures since the stop work order leaked. By noon, shareholder relations pushed an internal alert the quarterly earnings call would be restructured to address regulatory turbulence. Corporate speak for, "We don't know if we're even allowed to make money right now." At 2:00 p.m., the message came. Not from the CEO, not directly, they'd lost the nerve. It came through Monica, a former colleague from Risk who now worked at a firm tied to the very contract that just evaporated. She'd always been sharp. We used to eat lunch in the supply closet when the cafeteria was too loud. Her text was simple. "He wants to talk. Says it's urgent. Offered to make things right. Want me to pass you his number?" I stared at the screen. Typed, "Tell him I'm busy consulting." Then deleted it. Left her on read. Not out of pettiness. Out of precision. Because this wasn't rage anymore. This was control. This wasn't vengeance or ego. It wasn't a petty grudge. This was power. For the first time in years, I wasn't the duct tape they slapped over leaks to limp through another audit. I wasn't the safety net. I was the gate. The only gate. And I had the keys. They couldn't replace me. They couldn't fake me. And they damn sure couldn't force me. Because buried in that charter, the one I personally rewrote 8 years ago after saving them from an export control disaster, was Clause 9A. Reinstatement of RO status must be willingly initiated by the existing RO. If deemed unwilling or unresponsive, reinstatement is locked for 6 months. 6 months. Not a delay. A death sentence in the world of government contracts. One official note of unwillingness from me and the system froze solid. No overrides, no proxies, no backdoors, just silence and fallout. So I sat with that silence. Let it fill the space where panic used to live. 15 years I had worked through holidays, through weekends, through every fire I didn't start. I caught compliance landmines before they blew saved contracts before clients bolted. I protected that company from its own arrogance, and they thanked me with a cardboard box and a speech about refreshing talent. Well, talent refreshed. Contracts canceled. Stock sliding like ice on a hot windshield. And me, steady, untouchable. Monica pinged again. 2 hours later, he's serious. Says he'll meet whenever, wherever. Wants to apologize. I didn't answer, because apologies weren't signatures, and reinstatement required something more, my willingness. And I wasn't there. By Tuesday morning, the spin cycle had burned out. Desperation started leaking through the cracks in their $500 chairs. At 9:03 a.m., an email landed from an unfamiliar address, an assistant with a hyphenated last name, clearly drafted in to do the C-suite's dirty work. Subject line: reinstatement proposal. Temporary assignment. The body was chewed up legal jargon stitched together with PR fluff. And reading it, I realized something important. They weren't offering me a way back. They were begging for a lifeline. The email read like a panic attack disguised as formality. "We'd like to extend an invitation for you to rejoin in a transitional capacity as responsible officer to assist with system restoration. Duration 60 days. Compensation current salary plus 20%. No apology. No acknowledgement of the public firing. No mention of the fact they'd tried to forge my signature less than 3 days earlier. Just 60 days. A band-aid over a bullet wound." I didn't reply. 5 hours later, the COO reached out directly. Always more polished than the CEO MBA slick, with the tone of a podcast host and the empathy of a dead goldfish. She called from a blocked number, left a voicemail. "We're offering a consulting contract, triple your previous pay, remote work, full discretion, just a few signatures and reports. In exchange, strict confidentiality. We can make this clean. Easy." That word easy landed like a paper cut across my teeth. 15 years I cleaned up their messes and now they want it easy. I waited a full day before responding. Not to her, but through my lawyer. I forwarded the voicemail and had him draft a formal note. Client is open to engagement discussions contingent upon receipt of full proposed terms in writing. All communications must now include legal counsel. 15 minutes after the email was sent, the COO called again. This time, no voicemail. That night, their internal Slack logs leaked into a private Discord for current and former staff. A redacted board summary slipped through supposedly a draft. It wasn't flattering. Revenue projections in free fall. Another $6 million contract suspended pending review. Government auditors circling subcontractor relationships. One director had already resigned, 2 others under governance review, and buried halfway down the memo like a blood clot behind a polite smile. Resolution hinges on securing RO cooperation. Current stance, non-responsive. Recommendation offer, retention premium. Seek legal containment if necessary. Legal containment. They wanted to contain me. I printed that page not for evidence, just for satisfaction. A reminder that for once, I wasn't the duct tape. I was the lock. And they didn't have the key. I framed that leaked memo beside my desk between a mug that read, "Coffee first, chaos later," and the certificate I'd earned back in 2014 for catching a billing fraud scheme before it triggered an IRS inquiry. That was always the game. I built the guardrails. I signed the risk matrices. I patched holes before auditors smelled blood. I saved this company from its own arrogance more times than I could count. And they thought I'd fold for triple pay and a muzzle clause. No. This wasn't about helping. This was about leverage. Leverage doesn't come from effort. It comes from position. And I had it. Every hour of silence cost them 6 figures. Every minute dragged the CEO closer to the gallows the board was quietly assembling. They weren't offering me a lifeline. They were begging for the privilege of not drowning. An email arrived polished but desperate. We believe a direct good faith discussion will allow all parties to move toward resolution. Translation. We're bleeding out. Please save us before the patient flatlines. I told them I'd consider it, which meant I'd show up when I was ready. The meeting was set for 10 Honduras a.m. I walked in at 10:23. No slammed doors. No heels clicking like gunfire. Just quiet steps into a boardroom thick with tension air so heavy it could have been cut into profit shares. The CEO was mid-rant when his eyes locked on me. His voice pitched high, fraying from hours of failed authority. He narrowed his gaze, then snapped. "You have no idea the damage you've caused. Contracts, jobs, shareholder value." He didn't finish. The company lawyer shot up so fast his chair screeched across the floor. Pale as paper, he gripped the CEO's arm like he was restraining a man from stepping into fire. "Sir, stop." The room froze. His next words sliced through the silence. "She's the only one who can sign the reinstatement. Not one of several. Not our best option. The only." Every head turned. Not to my face. To my hands. Hands they now understood were the bridge between them and a compliance gridlock devouring millions by the hour. And I didn't sit. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. I just set my bag on the table slow enough for the leather to echo in the silence. Then I opened my notebook, clicked my pen, and began writing not for them, but for me. Let them wonder. Was it notes? A list of demands? Or maybe a record for the feds? The CEO's mouth opened, but the lawyer cut him off with a single sharp shake of his head. "Anything you say now could be construed as coercion. We're past negotiation without her willing consent." Willing consent. The phrase hung in the air like a guillotine blade. I let my eyes travel the room. Directors shifting uncomfortably. The COO staring at the table as if the wood grain held salvation. The CFO tapping his pen too fast. eyes darting at the clock, likely calculating how much this very minute was costing them. And me, calm. Because I'd known since the moment I pressed submit in that elevator. I held every card. They weren't even at the table unless I allowed it. I waited until every gaze landed on me twice, once in shock and once in resignation. Then, without a word, I pulled out a single sheet of paper and slid it across the table. 3 bullet points. That's all. 7-figure payout wired within 48 hours. Full benefits reinstated retroactively, health, retirement, stock options backdated to the day they fired me. The CEO's immediate resignation effective before the ink dried on my reinstatement. And at the bottom, one line in block print: failure to agree will trigger official written notice of unwillingness to return per clause 9A. Reinstatement locked for 6 months. Non-negotiable. The CEO sputtered, fury rising, but the lawyer cut him off again. She's right. Clause 9A locks designation if she's unwilling. No court, no agency, no appeal changes that. The silence was heavy enough to choke. The CFO's pen stopped. The COO finally lifted her eyes. The board chair leaned forward, voice flat. Get it done. I pulled out my silver pen signed with the same calm I'd used to trigger the stop work order and slid the form back. No flourish, no gloating. I stood and walked out the boardroom door, clicking shut behind me, sealing them inside with the mess they made. And me, free. I've carried a lot of weight in silence, but now I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated, dismissed, or treated like you were replaceable? Share your story, because when we put these experiences into the open, they stop being private wounds and start becoming proof of resilience. I read every word, and I want this space to be where people like us, people who kept the lights on while others collected the glory, finally get to be seen. Your voice matters. Mine was silenced in a boardroom, but here together we can make sure it rings out. Support doesn't always look like shouting or slamming doors. Sometimes support is simply saying, I see what you carried. I recognize the quiet strength it took to keep everything from collapsing. Leave a comment for me, not just for me, but for everyone who has ever walked out with a cardboard box and a story no one believed. And if you've ever had to swallow humiliation at the hands of someone who thought they were untouchable, then you already know revenge isn't loud, it's steady. It's built on patience and precision. Here's my advice, drawn from hard years. Don't waste your power proving yourself to people who never valued you in the first place. Invest that energy in building leverage, knowledge, skills, relationships that no one can strip away with a pink slip. Remember, true control comes not from clinging to a seat at their table, but from knowing you could flip the table entirely if you chose. If this story resonates, let me know below. And if you're with me, standing for dignity, for justice, for quiet power, then stick around. We're just getting started.